All right, so this video is why Dave Ramsey would not recommend buying a business. And I often disagree with a lot of what Dave Ramsey says. As an example, he was on the Graham Stephan podcast, and Graham Stephan said, hey, if someone gave you $1 billion interest-free, an interest-free loan for $1 billion, would you take it? Guess what Dave Ramsey said? He said no, because he's sticking to his talking points of taking no debt, even though you could take that $1 billion, put it in a CD, earn interest, and then pay it back. So he's got strong opinions about stuff. He doesn't recommend buying a business. I'm very curious why, and let's see what kind of drama Dave and I can.
One of the things that comes up around an EntreLeadership event, if I'm at EntreLeadership Summit or Master Series, and oftentimes comes up with a call on the show here as well, is this idea of buying a business. Should I buy a business? Well, I met a guy the other day who had a huge operation, and he had done all of his growth by acquisition, meaning he went around the country buying up people that did what he did and put them all together and then created this conglomerate, this huge operation, and it was all by purchases. Ramsey has grown with virtually no purchases, completely organically. So I have not used that strategy to grow.
So this is a good point right here, and I'm going to speed up the talking pace for him. It's a good point because what happens is, especially someone more risk-averse like Dave, if you haven't done it yourself, you feel very uncomfortable with the concept of it. So I like the fact that he goes, hey, look, I haven't done it before. So he's not able to speak from experience like his other principles of saying, hey, I got myself in a debt. I had to declare bankruptcy. I got in trouble with it. Here's why I recommend that you do not do that.
My tendency is, most of the time when I'm talking to a small business person, unless you're already in a business working there and they say, all right, I want you to buy it from us, that's different. But if you're walking around on the street with an idea and I want to be in XYZ business, let's just say I want to be in the heating and air business. I'll just make up something, okay? My personal opinion is you'll actually end up, in most cases, better off to just get a truck and some tools and start. And just make some money, hire some people, buy another truck. Make some money, hire some people, buy another truck. Start hiring some office staff and create some processes, learn how to run a business, and grow the business organically from the ground up. That is what we've done, and honestly, a lot of times when you buy a small business, you're buying a basket of trouble.
So Dave says when you buy small business, you're often buying a basket of trouble. I agree with that, actually. There's a lot of talk about buying a business these days and a lot of content on it and influencers talking about it, and buying a business framed as like the best thing since sliced bread. Well, here's what I'll share. I own 2 franchise locations. The very first one I started up from scratch. Still very expensive, to open a franchise. It was $340,000 to get that location up and running. But, we rented what's called like a vanilla shell, which is you rent a space that's just completely empty. And we, did the entire build out over a period of 8 weeks and turned it into this beautiful franchise location. And about 1 year later, I also purchased a resale. So this is buying a business. It was with the same franchise brand, but it was an existing struggling location completely on the other side of the country. And my store that I started up from scratch, number 1, was always much more successful than the resale that I bought. Number 2, it was a basket of trouble the entire time. That's not to say that that's always the case, but it can be the case often. And there's all sorts of other things to unpack here about buying a business and why a lot of people actually should not do it. Of course, there's a bunch of stories of it working. But what I've seen, being the CEO of Franchise Empire, where we've worked with hundreds of franchise buyers, we've helped hundreds of franchise buyers actually buy. We've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people. And I've had hundreds of conversations with entrepreneurs, people that want to be entrepreneurs over the last 6 years. And oftentimes, someone who's looking to buy a business is trying to buy a business because they think it's easier than starting it on their own. And they're trying to avoid the hard work. That's just the reality of it. And a lot of times it can be harder. And from when I had watched a few minutes of this video about a week ago, I think he winds up talking about it, this point. So let's see what he says. But so far, I agree with Dave, which is surprising.
There's a lot of stuff going on. But there are instances where it does make sense to buy a business. But I think sometimes what people are doing is thinking that buying an existing business is a shortcut to success. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's a shortcut to a nightmare. So you really want to know what you're getting into if you're going to buy. So, first rule, if you're going to buy a business, either just from the outside or you're working there, I want you to do due diligence. And that means you really have to get the fine-toothed comb out and comb every tangle out of this thing. I want to look at the tax returns. I want to look at the books. I want to talk to the sales team. I want to interview customers. I really want to know.
So yes and no to some of that. I've actually made some videos on how to do due diligence with resales. In addition to buying, resale myself, I've come this close to buying a bunch of resales where I've gone deep into due diligence. So yes, first and foremost is you've got to see the profit and loss statements. Then you want to validate the profit and loss statements with tax returns. And then basically you want to validate what's on the profit and loss statements and tax returns with a report. So as an example, you want to see sales reports from the CRM or the point of sale system. You want to see the actual payroll reports from the payroll system. The odds that you get to talk to any of the employees or talk to any of the customers is highly unlikely because oftentimes when someone's selling their business, it's confidential. Their employees don't know that they're selling the business, right? Because it's a risk to the sale. You go tell some of your top employees that you're selling, and they're like, "Well, I don't want to work with the other owner," and they leave, right? Oftentimes the owners are not telling their employees. Number one, um, and number two, yeah, why? Like, if I'm selling my business, I'm not going to let you talk to my customers. My customers have a relationship with me. They're going to be uncomfortable with the fact that we're selling the business, possibly. But so a lot of that is not, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to talk to customers and staff when buying a business. And here's what I've found is that in the instance, these people selling these businesses, guys, part of why they're so successful is because they know the business inside and out. Like as an example, a successful plumbing business that's doing millions of dollars of sales, it typically started from a guy who was a plumber and eventually continued to buy back his time and hire a team and eventually got himself out of the field and continue to learn these skills of marketing and growing his business and leading a team. And that's eventually how he got successful or she got successful in that business. So they know the day-to-day of the business inside and out. But then you have these people, right, who want to buy a business purely because, hey, like I'm trying to replace my income. I get it, 100%. But then you know nothing about the business. Is it possible for you to succeed? Yes. Yeah, 100%. But you're probably going to have a really experienced manager in place and pay for someone to replace the knowledge of that owner unless you're going to get really hands-on and learn how to run the business. But again, most of the people that I've spoken to, they're trying to take the easy way out. They want to buy a business thinking that it's already successful and that they'll just get to sit back and like, the business is already running, doing $300,000 in profit. I'm good. So it's just it's not the way to take an easy way out. Also, if you've never had experience running and operating a business, number one, number two, leading a team, like hiring a team, managing that team, firing people on the team, then you're putting yourself at massive risk because a lot of running the business is managing and leading your team. And the analogy that I use is this: you've never driven before, you're just learning how to drive, right? And Like someone you get in the driver's seat of like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, and it's just way too much power for you to handle. Like you still haven't even learned to drive yet. You put your foot on the gas, the car's going to take off. You're going to be out of control. The other analogy I use is you're literally stepping onto a moving train, and the conductor of the train, something happened to him. He's no longer there. He stepped out of the train, or he's laying there on the ground, right? Unresponsive. You've now got to conduct a train. Have you ever conducted a train before? No, you're trying to figure it out. And the train's moving, so there are real consequences to every decision that you make, right? As an example, when we bought our resale store, I mean, I already had experience in the franchise. We had a different menu at each location, and I made a change in the new location that we bought. And within the next few months, the store sales went down like 30% because the customers did not like the change. And this was me. I was already running a successful location. So there are real consequences when you have an existing business that's already up and running.
Every stinking detail about this business. No surprises. I really want to get under the hood and spend as much time on that as I can. When we're buying a piece of income producing real estate, say an office building or an apartment complex or a warehouse or something, we put the property under contract and then we go through their books for due diligence. We look at every lease, we look at every piece of paper, we look at the streams of income, we pull the taxes for ourselves, the property taxes, we run our own quotes on the insurance, we check the zoning and make sure it's zoned legally. We look at everything. I bought a piece of property the other day, and we even drilled it. And had it checked for EPA, see if there had been any kind of leakage of gas or anything on that property before. Because it was in a commercial area, and I was a little bit worried that there'd been, you can get into dadgum EPA mess. So due diligence, you really dig into the details. On that last piece of property we bought, we took 6 months digging through the details before we closed on it. So take your time and go deep on the due diligence. Most people are lazy about that. Cut short, and the current owner doesn't want you to see all their junk under the hood, but don't buy it if you can't get under the hood. Don't buy it if you can't do due diligence. Now,
What I see is that sometimes, number one, people get lazy. I think it's a combination of things, not just lazy, right? Number one, I do think there is an element of laziness. And it's like, oh, that's a lot of work and effort to do it. But I think it's a lot of that's tied into lack of knowledge. You just don't know how, right? So you don't know how to do due diligence on the business, what exactly to look for, or how to interpret and understand what it is that you've collected in these numbers. So it becomes overwhelming, and you're just like, all right, I'm just going to assume that it's accurate and that it makes sense. So I think that's one of the elements. I think the third element, so lazy, and then not understanding, and then number 3 is just getting over emotional. You get so excited, and you get this this bias, right? This confirmation bias that you just get so excited, and you're willing to look past, like the yellow flags, the red flags, or just crossing your T's and dotting your I's.
once you get to that point, you need to pay cash for a business. You don't need to be going $250,000 in debt to buy a sub shop,
Totally
a
disagree,
pizza
Dave.
parlor, a heat and air company, and you got this lien on your house, and you got this anchor around your neck, and you're trying to go swimming. So you save up and pay cash for whatever it is you're buying, which again leads us back to starting it from the ground up, possibly because you don't have the money. But if you're sitting on that kind of cash, you say, I'm actually going to buy this business, I've done my due diligence, then there are 3 different methods to put a valuation on a business. One is a gross revenue multiplier. Now, a gross revenue multiplier would be in an industry.
I totally disagree that you should buy the business in cash. That's like Dave saying, like, you buy your house in cash. The odds of people being able to buy a house in cash is ridiculous. Most people are going to have to get a mortgage. Dave saying, hey, buy your car in cash. The odds of most people being able to buy their car in cash is ridiculous. Should you buy a used car, like Dave says, that's a few years old, that has already depreciated, yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, my vehicle is a 2017 vehicle. Granted, it is a Range Rover and it has 550 horsepower and it's a lot of fun to drive, but it's a 2017, right? Um, and but this whole point of like paying cash for everything is ridiculous because most people are going to it's not going to be realistic. And by the time you have the cash to buy it, you're 10 years down the road, right? You just missed out on this opportunity. And the reality is there's a lot of people that have gotten into entrepreneurship successfully by taking out loans. Is there risk? Yes. Guess what? That's the reality of starting a business. It comes with risk. So I totally disagree with Dave.
Where it's very standard that X times or 10 times gross or 15 times gross or 5 times gross is the valuation because the operations of that industry that you're in are so standardized that when you've got that gross, it automatically means a Y amount of profit. X gross means Y profit. And so you don't have to think about if it's there or not. So, for instance, I've been in the broadcast world, and in the old days, a lot of radio stations were being gobbled up and bought by corporate. So an iHeart or a Cumulus would come into the market and buy a radio station. And radio stations throughout my career have gone anywhere from 5 to 15 times cash flow. And so they're not looking at profit. They're just looking at the gross revenues minus a couple of items and basically what they call cash flow in that world. So that's a gross rent multiplier or a gross multiplier, gross revenue multiplier. Very few small businesses actually sell on that.
That is correct. Most small businesses are a multiple of their profits, or what's called SDE, seller discretionary earnings, which is basically taking the amount of profit that you're making. Let's say you're making $100,000 in profit, and then let's say you get other financial benefit from it. You're paying your car loan through the business. You're paying your cell phone through the business. You're paying your wife through the business. All these other financial benefits that you as the owner get, you roll that back in, and then it's typically like 2 to 4 times multiple. But I'm guessing he's about to get into that.
If you're in a franchise situation where there's 2,000 stores just like yours, they may have a standardized gross revenue multiplier and say that's what it's worth. But most small businesses, when you're purchasing them, I would not use that method. But it is there. That's one of the 3 methods. The second method is book value. And book value is if you close it and collect all the receivables and pay the payables, sell off the inventory, and sell off the equipment, what is that pile of money? So I was talking to a guy the other day, the equipment was worth $1 million. Or $1.5 million.
Oftentimes, in my experience, having evaluated dozens and dozens of small businesses for sale, is you'll have the purchase price that's based off of the profits of the company. So if the business is profiting $100,000 a year, the price is going to be 2 to 4 times that. So somewhere between 200 to 400,000. And then if there's substantial equipment, the equipment is purchased separate from the purchase price. So in that instance, let's say they value it at a 3 times multiple, the business sells for the price is $300,000. But they say, hey, this is not including XYZ equipment. If you want the equipment too, the equipment's valued at X number of dollars. Or inventory. It's similar with a business that has a substantial amount of value of inventory. The inventory has a separate price to it, which is pretty common. It's standard overall.
So the book value on that business was at least $1.5 million just because he had that much in equipment. And so, because if you just bought it and sold the equipment, you'd have $1.5 million. So if you bought it for more than that, you'd lose money on the transaction. If you bought it for less than that, you'd make money on the transaction. So in receivables, obviously, that's the collectible receivables. That's companies that owe that business money. And then payables, you got to pay the expenses and net it out. And so what cash do I have in the checking account after I pay my bills and receive all my outstanding invoices? And then I sell off the equipment and I sell off the inventory. What have I got? I was talking to some friends the other day that are winding down, and they looked at selling their business and they figured out that their inventory and their locations were so valuable that they were more valuable if they just closed them. So they're setting up a 2-year going out of business strategy, and they've got several stores, so they're going to put some of them out of business the first year, some of them out of business the second year, and at the end of it, they'll end up with a bunch of paid-for real estate and have cashed out all the inventory and all the receivables, and they'll go home with a pile of money. That's their strategy to get out, because they can get more for the business on book value than any other way, by cashing out the inventory, cashing out the equipment, and cashing out the cash. That's your book value. Now, if you're buying a business for book,
I don't understand that scenario. That's weird to me. Why not just sell it and then sell the inventory as part of the business sale in addition? But okay.
you're really not buying anything as far as the business goes. You're just buying a bunch of stuff, because the business is not really making anything. The typical way that we value a small business is a multiplier, or what's called a cap rate, a capitalization rate, on the net profit, the taxable income that the tax returns show on the business. Not what they think they make, not all this, none of that, nothing matters then but the net profit. Now, if most small businesses will go from 4 to 5 times net profit. So if the little business is making $200,000, that means it's worth $800,000 to $1 million. If the net profit after the manager has been paid to operate it, and you're an absentee investor, all expenses have been paid to operate the business, what is that net profit? Now, and so if the owner is not paying himself except out of profits and he's running it, then you've got to take a manager's salary out of those net profits before you do the multiplier.
This is exactly what I was saying before.
And again, 4 to 5 times that. So 4 times that means you want a 25% rate of return on your money. Well, that's a lot. Well, I can get 14 or 12 on mutual funds, and small business is ultra high risk for me to.
I can get 14 or 12 on mutual funds. That's crazy. Talk about mutual funds is wild. Instead of ETFs. And there was a long time of the reason why he didn't break his narrative on mutual funds is because he had this whole business model where they have financial advisors that pay to be in one of his Smart Vestor Pros. And so they're making all this money referring people out to financial advisors.
A small business as an investor, and that's what you're looking at here. So I want a 25% rate of return on my money. That's 4 times. A 20% rate of return on your money is 5 times. So again, somewhere in there is the valuation. Well, we have a great name. Our brand is known in the city. We've been open 80 years. Doesn't matter. We have a great location. Doesn't matter. The only reason it's a great location or a great brand name or great brand recognition is if it creates profit. If it doesn't create profit, it's just a wish. It's just nostalgia. If you have a great location and you're not profitable, by definition, you don't have a great location. Hello. So that's just bullcrap. Well, everybody knows our name. Great. How's that monetizing for you? I want to see profit as a result of that. Otherwise, you just have created a Sunday school class where you have a great name and don't make a profit. That's okay if you want to be a Sunday school teacher. It's not okay if you run a business and you want to sell it. You want to sell it, it better be profitable. 4 to 5 times net profit after all expenses, including a manager to operate the business if there's not one already being paid out of that P&L. Take that out of the profit before you run these numbers. So that's the proper way to value it, and then pay cash. Now, you've also heard me where Gen 1 or Gen 2 is buying out Gen 1, or where a key employee or two are getting together and they're buying out the boss, or they're selling it to somebody else, whatever. The only way I would ever consider, I personally wouldn't do this, but it's the only way I would consider not yelling at you for doing it, is for you to set it up and say, okay, I'm going to pay This thing's making $200,000. We're going to pay you $800,000 for it, and I'm going to take the manager's salary. So there's still $200,000. I'm going to step in and be the manager, and I'm making $200,000 profit beyond me having a living wage out of that manager's salary. So if you're already working there, you just keep your existing salary and it's coming out, but you still have a net profit of $200K, still have a sale price of, say, $800K. Then you say, I'm going to give you 90% or 80% of the net profits until we reach 800. Then if there's lower net profits because COVID hits, you're not bankrupted by this transaction because they get 90% of the net profits. So if net profits are 100 instead of 200, it's 90% of that.
The scenario where key employees buy out the business is a common scenario, and it's an ideal scenario because you know that there are people there that are equipped to run the business and make sure that the business is successful. So this is an interesting take by Dave, and actually I agree with most of what he has to say. But there was a video that him and his team did about this person that called in saying that they were failing with a cookie franchise that they bought, and it was a really interesting conversation. If you want to watch that video, you can check it out here because there was some really just kind of stupid stuff, quite honestly, that the guy said there. So I think you'll find it interesting. Go check it out. Make sure to subscribe before you go, and we'll see you on the next one.